Ontario government is continuing to defend its controversial Bill 5, sweeping legislation that looks to fast-track major projects.
Serious leaders of all political stripes are in agreement that we need to move faster. We need to get projects approved faster, get shovels in the ground faster, and get good-paying jobs created faster. Speaker, that's why we're moving forward with Bill 5.
The bill would give government the power to create so-called special economic zones where companies could be exempt from following provincial laws. The bill would also remove some endangered species protections. It's received pushback, including from environmental groups and Indigenous leaders. Yesterday, several hundred First Nations members gathered in front of Ontario's legislature to protest the bill, saying it tramples on their rights. Opposition parties are also among those calling for the bill to be scrapped. Marit Stiles is the leader of the Ontario NDP, and she joins me now. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Great to be here, JP.
So tell me what's concerning for you about Bill 5. And, I saw some of your language. You're calling it a massive overreach. Why are you so concerned?
Well, look, this is the government of Ontario using the powers they have to, in a really difficult economic time, certainly, to make an unprecedented power grab. That's how I see this. They're creating these no-law zones where they'll be able to override provincial laws, municipal bylaws, anything and everything, with the excuse of wanting to build and develop. Unfortunately, in doing this, the legislation has just been a complete mess. It is an overreach, absolutely. They can't find anyone who wants to support this legislation. And of course, one of the major concerns is that it also will trample treaty rights for First Nations people. So I'm seeing unprecedented opposition here in the province of Ontario, actually, to this legislation. We know that about 87,000 emails have been sent to about 90 ridings across this province by farmers, community members, First Nations, lots of people who are opposed to this.
The government, though, says, it ran on a commitment to cut red tape, to get rid of it, to make it easier for companies to do business in Ontario, especially when we're grappling with Trump and his threats, and that, voters handed them a large majority government. Don't they have some leeway to change things around with that sort of mandate?
Well, look, I mean, certainly this is a moment when I think Ontarians, like a lot of Canadians, are looking for an opportunity to grow our economy, to create more jobs, to protect jobs and opportunities here. But this government had a choice. They could have, I think, instead of opening things up for debate, for example, and listening to people, the government chose to ram this legislation through with no consultation, no debate, no discussion with First Nation leaders. Instead of overriding those treaty rights, they could have sat down in partnership with First Nations, and they chose not to do that. That's not good government, and I think the concern that many Ontarians have is that this government has a terrible track record. They are under RCMP criminal investigation right now over the Greenbelt grab. Many of their laws have been caught up in court, and they've ended up having to repeal a lot of bad legislation. So my argument has been, do it right from the start. Let's do this right. Let's do this together. And let's not end up derailing everything just so the government can make this power grab.
You mentioned Indigenous rights. Yesterday, your deputy leader, Saul Mamakwa, was asked to leave the Queen's Park, asked to leave the chamber after making some comments about the Premier. You walked out with him. How did you feel about how all that went down?
Well, look, as you know, Saul Mamakwa, he's the MPP for Quetnung. He's my deputy leader, and he is First Nations. He is a rights holder. He spoke about what First Nations people and rights holders are saying about this government, that they do not trust this government, and that they think the government is lying to them. Well, you can't say that the government is lying or anybody is lying in the legislature, and he spoke his truth, and he wouldn't withdraw that, and I think he was right to do that. I think that at the end of the day, the government is hearing this from people all across the province. They know that people don't trust them and that this legislation is undemocratic, and it's going to be fought in the courts or on the land. And I think Saul and I and the entire NDP official opposition here in Ontario are united with many Ontarians who have concerns about this legislation.
But some folks are just really fed up with how slow things are to get built in this country, right? It can take months, sometimes years, maybe more than a decade in some instances to get anything done, anything big actually happen, right? Like it's really frustrating for a lot of voters out there, and they're looking to the Premier now and his party and saying, at least he's doing something about it. At least he's trying to ram things through. Maybe there are some considerations that he should make, and maybe he should not have ignored this, that, or the other thing. But people are feeling like it's time to do something to get this economy going, especially when we're facing such unprecedented threats from the U.S. Are you not sympathetic to that frustration?
Well, look, I mean, when you're talking about a project like, for example, the Ring of Fire, which is one of the excuses the government is using to ram this legislation through, certainly there's an interest in making the process work more effectively. But what we've been saying and what First Nations leadership are saying as well is that this is actually going to hold things back. I mean, also hearing that, by the way, from mining companies who know, for example, the importance of free, prior, and informed consent, that there is a duty to consult. And this legislation, they're concerned, is actually going to hold things back even further. So I think, look, there is an interest, as I said, out there right now in working together on real nation-building projects. But I will say as well, there's a lot of examples in Ontario of projects that have not moved forward, not because of rules and regulations entirely. It's often because the government themselves have been headed in the wrong direction. The Greenbelt scandal is a really good example of that. They said they were doing that to build homes. Well, they completely messed it up. And as you know, the RCMP is investigating that still. And at the end of the day, we haven't seen a single home built in the province of Ontario. So, I mean, the government likes to pretend that things like treaty rights are red tape. But if you approach it in that way, we are going to end up holding things back even further.
You might have seen that the Premier left that meeting with Mark Carney yesterday feeling pretty good about it, saying that this was the best meeting he's had with the Prime Minister in 7 years since he's been on the job. First, what do you make of how seemingly well that meeting went between the Premiers and the Prime Minister? And what would you like to see Ottawa fast-track in Ontario? Is there a nation-building project that you would like to see get off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we're all excited to see people moving and working together. I am a really big believer in a Team Canada, Team Ontario approach. So it's always good to see that. But look, when the Premier of Ontario, Mr. Ford, put forward a list of nation-building projects. His top of the list was this tunnel under the 401, which most engineers would tell you is a complete fantasy. If you want to talk about nation-building projects that can get people working and get good things done, let's talk about building affordable homes, building schools and hospitals. And yes, let's build out infrastructure. Let's fix our crumbling bridges and roads. And absolutely, let's build transit. These are nation-building projects, not some fantasy tunnel under the 401 that is Doug Ford's pet project.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much to Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles. Appreciate you coming on.